We have with us today the Conservative candidate, the Honorable Mr. Jason Kenney. Mr. Kenney, welcome.
Great to be here. Happy Easter.
Thank you. Same to you. Immigration today is as old as Canada itself. And over the last many years, we've had a lot of immigrants come into Canada. And what are your thoughts specifically on immigrants and human capital coming into Canada?
Well, you know, it's a cliche to say that Canada is a country of immigrants, but what is remarkable about this country is it is the only Western democracy with a without an anti-immigrant expression in our political debate, and with a pretty robust pro-immigration consensus in Canada. And that's because most Canadians see immigration as contributing to our economic growth. Most Canadians understand that we have an aging population, the baby boomers are about to start retiring, and that the single largest economic challenge we're going to have in the mid to long range is a shortage of skilled workers. That's why we are maintaining the highest levels of immigration in Canadian history. We, as a government, over the past 5 years have welcomed more newcomers than any previous government. We've been welcoming about 254,000 new permanent residents on average. It's also why we're maintaining the highest levels of immigration in the developed world, at about 0.8% of our population. So, but it's very important, as to your question, very important to ensure that amongst the mix of immigrants who we welcome, that the focus is on those who have the skills that are most likely to contribute to the economy. We don't want to bring people here to be unemployed or underemployed. And we don't, you know, we want to make sure we're bringing the priorities on younger immigrants who are going to successfully integrate, get, and keep good jobs.
Okay. When we talk about immigration, we also talk about assimilation. And we have theories on the mosaic and the melting pot. And Canada has always been a mosaic. And according to you, how important is it for immigrants to assimilate quickly into the Canadian mainstream society?
Well, I think it's extremely important that immigrants integrate, especially since we're maintaining such high levels of immigration. You know, generally the Canadian experience in managing the challenges of diversity has been quite positive. The rest of the Western world looks at Canada as kind of a model, but I think we should not be. I think we should be focused on the challenges of integration in the future, because one of the concerns I have is a tendency of people when they come to settle in the same neighborhood or region as people from the same country of origin. Now that's a natural part of the pattern of immigration. People have always done that. And there's a network of social support when someone arrives and they go into a community where their neighbors might be from the same country of origin, and that's fine, as long as that doesn't transmit into the second and third generation like it has in parts of Western Europe. You have frankly the Turkish community in Germany that's living in ghettos, locked out, or the Maghrebi community in the Parisian suburbs, or parts of Britain where Muslim immigrants have not been given economic opportunities and have not integrated. We don't want to relive those experiences. We want to make sure that people from all around the world, when they get to Canada, yes, they can maintain, in the sense of our mosaic, they can maintain and should maintain pride for what's best about their own cultural background, but they should also be very deliberate about integrating. And we, in terms of the government and the broader Canadian society, have a responsibility to ensure that there are no barriers to their integration, so that foreign trained professionals can get a fair shot at working in a licensed profession, to ensure that we can help them move forward, get and keep good jobs. So it's a bit of both. You know, economic integration is so important because, frankly, someone with a good job is happy.
Yeah.
You know, and they're going to be more likely to just get along with everyone else.
Yeah.
But there's also a requirement that people make a deliberate effort to learn and live in accordance with the historically grounded Canadian values: rule of law, democratic values, equality of men and women, respect for religious freedom, and so on.
Thank you. Going back to your statement on getting professionals into the country and making sure they have jobs. Now, your new immigration policy post June 26, 2010, specifically with reference to the federal skilled worker class. Now, on the list of 29 professions, I find that technology or engineering is not listed. And any particular reason why that is not part of the list of professions?
The list was developed following extensive consultations with provincial governments, with industry groups, labor unions, and the general public. And it's based on those professions which have a significant labor shortage on a national level. And I think our research found that there is not a shortage of engineers or people in the technological fields, for example. Having said that, there are other ways that those people can get into Canada, such as through the provincial nominee programs, which Ontario has not really developed, but most of the other provinces have, where an employer can say, look, I need this information technologist. I can't find someone with these skills in Canada. I nominate him. And that person is then allowed to immigrate on a pretty fast-track basis in a few months. There's also the Canadian experience class, where an employer, let's say they need a specialized IT expert. They could bring them in as a high-skilled temporary foreign worker, and then after 2 years of working in Canada on temporary status, that person can become a permanent resident through the Canadian experience class. So the doors are not barred for people in those backgrounds. It's just that they have to go through different programs, because we're trying to focus the skilled worker program on those occupations which are facing a significant shortage on a national level.
I just want to add a comment on that, and specifically with reference to the U.S. market. A joint Duke University study revealed that between 1995 and 2005, Indian immigrants have founded more engineering and technology companies in the U.S. than immigrants from the UK, China, Taiwan, and Japan combined. And if you really look at the pattern of immigration to the United States going back into the 60s, 70s, there's been a lot of technology professionals who have gone to the U.S.
On temporary status, usually.
And then they converted into a green card, became citizens. Now, this is the biggest opportunity for Canada, because if you can get those technology professionals here, you could create a Silicon Valley in Canada.
You know, that's a point well taken, and I think we've been somewhat successful at attracting those kinds of people. Look, one of the big problems we had when our government came to office was a huge backlog in immigration overall. We inherited a backlog of over 800,000 applications, and over 500,000 in the skilled worker program. It was taking 6 to 7 years to process applications. So a lot of these brilliant young graduates, for example, from the Indian technical schools, we're looking at, if they're looking to emigrate to a developed country, they could get accepted to go to Australia or New Zealand as a permanent resident in 6 to 7 months, or they could go to the U.S. on temporary status and eventually get their green card, as you point out. But Canada's position was, get to the back of that 7-year line. And so we were losing out on the competition for some of the brightest people who can add immeasurably to future economic growth. So that's why we restructured the skilled worker program so that new applicants are processed in less than a year. And it's also why we've allowed high-skilled temporary foreign workers to become permanent residents through the Canadian experience class, which is essentially what the Americans have been doing with that kind of those kinds of skilled workers.
No, that's certainly, I mean, that's a very valid point that you make. But if you really look at, if you want to attract the technology professionals from India, if you give them the residency right away, rather than making them go through the work experience or gaining a Canadian education, I think you would be able to attract more people, because today I think the challenge when a technology professional in India faces is, do I go to the US first or do I go to some other country? And today Canada has that opportunity. And again, going back to the...
Can I just say on that point, that the most important thing is the overall economic policy be strong. And this is good news. Our business tax rates are actually are going lower than the United States, and we're attracting major IT companies moving north to Canada, in part because of the lower tax rates. I recently met a Canadian of South Asian origin, of Indian origin, who studied in Canada. He went and ended up working for Microsoft in Redwood, Washington. But he moved an entire division of Microsoft up to Richmond, BC 2 years ago, and that's employing a lot of Indian immigrants. So there is that big economic policy is part of this as well.
Now going back to the list of those professions. Now I was looking at the list of applications received as of April 19th of this year, And you had just about 7 crane operators apply and about 49 plumbers. And my question is, let's say a particular category is not used up because you have 1,000, is a cap per profession. So let's say, by end of April, you don't have those categories are not used up. Will they be used for some other category?
Yeah, we may do that. I'll have to we'll see what happens in this election to go back. Hopefully, if I'm still Minister of Immigration, we'll sort that out. But I think the answer is yes. Okay.
And also one quick point before we move on. Now, ethnic media professionals. Now, that's not listed as an occupation. And it's very important because today, if you look at Canada, once Canada is becoming more multicultural, you're also going to have more of ethnic media or multicultural media. And today, we face that challenge. We face the challenge that today, if I want to bring in a good production executive from India, he's not on those list of 29 classifications. So one of the things that I would recommend to you is to, if you can, include the ethnic media professionals as well as a category.
Do you have a conflict of interest in not asking for that? Just kidding. I will take that into consideration. Actually, the reason why we put these caps and limited the occupations for the skilled worker program was, again, to deal with that huge backlog that we developed. The problem was every year we were getting more applications than there were positions available to land people. Okay. And so the backlog just kept getting longer and longer and longer. So we finally had to say, we had to do the same thing that Australia, the US, New Zealand, UK does, every other immigrant receiving country, and say, we will only, we will put a limit on the number of applications that we receive in a given year. And this is the way we did it. But there are other programs that are more flexible, like Provincial Nominee Program, which is not limited to any particular career.
Okay. Now going back to students, now today you have Canada that attracts about 7,000 Indian students a year versus Australia, which does about 97,000, and US almost close to that number.
What year, how recent are your figures?
I'm looking at the figures as of 2009.
Yeah, so things have actually changed quite dramatically. Okay. Australia's student program has been taking a huge nosedive. Okay. I think everyone in Australia would agree, they ramped up their student visa program too fast without really keeping an eye on the quality of the programs that students were going into. And so you ended up with an entire industry of student recruiters, call it, post-secondary recruiter agents in India and other China, who were selling kids on programs that were really shoddy, non-accredited, commercial operations. So a lot of kids came in and they felt they were getting cheated. Yeah. And then similarly, there were just so many that a lot of these kids ended up living in sort of immigrant student ghettos, and that created a bit of a backlash in Australia, which isn't as open to immigration as Canada. So as a result of those and other problems, they've been taking a huge nosedive. On the other side, our numbers have been going up very appreciably. In fact, over the last 2 years, we've tripled the number of student visas issued to Indian students coming to Canada. And the track is going up. Now, what we're trying to do is put a focus on quality. We're working with the provinces to have them indicate to us, as the federal government, which post-secondary institutions are they prepared to vouch for as credible quality institutions for which we will facilitate visas on a faster track basis. Because we want to cut out the dodgy profit-making operations that sometimes don't offer quality programs to students. And those are the ones more likely to use unscrupulous recruitment agents in India and elsewhere. So we're trying to grow the program in a sustainable way based on qualified students attending quality schools in Canada and screening out the bad recruitment agents in India and Asia. And we're having success in that. One of the reasons is the creation of the Canadian Experience class by our government, which allows foreign students following their studies to apply for permanent residency from within Canada. By the way, we're also giving those students open work permits while they're in Canada so they can help make ends meet, and a 2-year open work permit at the end of their studies. I think this program represents in many ways the future of immigration to Canada. Because if you get a bright young student from wherever, they've got a Canadian degree, they've improved their English language skills, and they have a little bit of Canadian work experience, they are going to do extremely well in Canada. All of the data tells us younger immigrants do better, and obviously having a Canadian degree rather than a foreign degree will be immediately recognized by Canadian employers. So we're very enthusiastic about this program.